Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion.
In this week's show, happiness, overly simple measures of people issues, and extroverted versus introverted leaders. A discussion with Lisette Offley. Lisette is the founder of Genius Material and the Genius Principles. She helps people break through the glass ceiling, building on their natural preferences and helping people to learn. And questions which simply annoy introverts and display a lack of thought. This week, I see in the news that rural Denmark will come to a standstill on Sunday because it's Dancing Cow Day. Now, I didn't want to attempt the Danish pronunciation, but I would welcome anybody that's listening who might help me. Many people go to watch the moment when Denmark's 200,000 organic cows are let out of their barns for summer to graze on grass. An event so exciting that the creatures run, leap, buck and dance with joy. I don't know about you, but I've never really thought about cows looking happy. But obviously they can be. So too, obviously, with introverts and others who might not attempt to outwardly show their emotions. Speaking of happiness, an article in the Daily Telegraph caught my eye. Staff in Downing Street have accused Boris Johnson's new top team of patronising them by installing so-called happy machines around number 10 to monitor how aides are feeling. I'm sure you've seen the sort of things in motorway service areas or airports where you're asked if you've had a good or bad experience by pressing a happy or sad face. Do you think this is a good approach to measuring happiness in business, if indeed it measures it? Maybe the staff just need more parties, but perhaps we won't even go there this week. More seriously though, it's an attempt to get lots of data points with little depth, in the hope that this is better than fewer, deeper insights. Perhaps with thousands of people at an airport toilet, that might work, but in an office? I think it's quite different to one technique I do recommend when it comes to team or board meetings. Getting each person to commit to a score at the end of the meeting as part of the wrap-up helps improve regular meetings. It works because when you ask anybody scoring less than 80% what would have made the meeting better, they give you an answer that you can all learn from. It also gives them a focus to speak and thus work well for introverts as well as extroverts. But do it each meeting and remind people at the beginning of the meeting so you don't create issues with internal processing introverts not wanting to create an answer out of thin air. You'll already know that I don't believe being a great leader means you have to be an extrovert. It's a point I regularly make. There are examples of great leaders all around the world who are introverts. Richard Branson is one that often comes up. Psychology Today recently reported the results of a new survey where James Learmine, Associate Professor of Organisation and Human Resources at the University of Buffalo School of Management and co-author of the study, said that people with superior communication skills have a leadership advantage. But it's not extroversion that's important, since extroverts aren't necessarily any better at interpersonal communication than introverts or ambiverts. The survey was a detailed video discussion and scored group decision-making study involving over 400 people. The results showed that communication, not extroversion, was the key factor driving perceptions of leadership potential, and those extroverts weren't any better at communicating in the group setting than introverts. What might you do with this information? Firstly, it's a prod in the eye for the extrovert bias around leadership, and anything which makes us question our unconscious bias is a good thing. Secondly, it's a reminder of the importance of communication skills when it comes to leadership. A slightly stranger news item to finish off with involves a pirate's hat and the church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Gary Smith is a Pastafarian and a leader of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. He's campaigning on the right to wear a pirate hat for a driver's license photo, reported the Vancouver Island's Times. According to followers, Pastafarianism is a real, legitimate religion, as much as any other. Don't worry, I'm not about to wear a colander on my head, which would signify I was a Pastafarian, although I'm always intrigued by people who are prepared to stand up for what they believe in. No, that one had nothing to do with introversion, and it's a very good time to move away from the weird and come on to the far, far more important, relevant and interesting. Let's chat to Lisette. Hi Lisette, how are you doing?
Hi, John. I'm well. How are you?
Very good indeed, thank you.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Obviously, we're going to talk about things like the glass ceiling and people's natural preferences. But just before we dive into that, are you an introvert, an extrovert, and perhaps more relevantly, what relevance do you see that has for business?
Well, to try and answer your question in the order you asked the questions, I am definitely an extrovert. I would say that it's a continuum. You're not one thing or another thing. And I've noticed how I've slid up and down that continuum over the years and according to different circumstances.
I'm kind of interested in your point about how you've found that you've slid up and down the scale at times. And is there any particular things that you find send you one way or the other, I guess?
I guess if I've had a busy day, maybe a really hectic day, or if I've had to step outside of my comfort zone and really, maybe really perform, and that could be conducting a webinar or coming on a podcast, to take it to its extreme, on occasion, getting on stage and literally performing, then I would expect myself to go looking for company afterwards and to wind down by talking a lot and sharing a lot and just getting around and talking to people and just getting out there and using up that spare energy.
The opposite to me then.
But I don't know whether it's got something to do with maybe the last 2 years, how nearly everything, at least until very, very recently, has all been online in the comfort of your own room. Whether I've just noticed that there's not been the need for me to go expending all that built up energy afterwards. Maybe I just haven't built up the energy in the first place. Who knows what the explanation is? But I suppose I've just got more used to doing things quietly.
Interesting.
Maybe it's got something to do with the last couple of years. I've heard other people, for example, Mark Lee was on your show recently, and he says that he's noticed that perhaps he's become more introvert over the years. Maybe it's an age thing as well. I don't know.
We better not say that about Mark. I know that when you're working with people and you help them to design their study systems for maximum learning, you use their profile around introversion and extroversion.
Yes, that's an interesting one, because I'm not a big fan of putting people in boxes and then expecting them to behave accordingly. But of course, there are times when a little bit of understanding of how somebody operates also gives them permission to be themselves. And so I do profile people, but I only profile people when I know for sure it's going to help us. And in this case, when I help people pass exams, it helps me to understand. And yes, the introversion, extroversion continuum is part of the thing that I'm profiling. There's a whole range of things. It helps us to cut to the chase. So instead of, often when they reach me, they've tried all sorts of things. They'll swear blind. They've tried everything. Of course, the thing is, it's much quicker to try the things that are more likely to suit the way that you already handle information beautifully. And by profiling, which is a relatively quick exercise, we can simply chop out 9/10 of some of the ideas that they might have tried in the past, or they might try moving forward. We'll just say goodbye to them. I mean, as human beings, we've got a lot in common, but there are some differences between us. And actually, those differences can make all the difference when it comes to studying. So I help people put together a very quick and straightforward and motivating and fun study system so that they get information into their head and they also keep it there. Because we're hardwired to forget. And very often what we do these days to try and learn information doesn't do it anymore. It might have worked at school or the last time we took exams, which in some cases can be quite some time ago. So to have a really, really strong, a robust and simple, straightforward system for first getting information into your head And then secondly, for keeping it there, knocks hours off the time people are spending. It gets rid of all that frustration. It means that instead of failing the same exam over and over, they're actually passing with a score of 80% and by doing less work. So I use profiling with my professional services people when they want to put together a better study system than the one that they've been using up till now. But with the other part of my business, the Genius Principles, it's all about personal development. It's about confidence, procrastination, and imposter syndrome, and getting rid of those, leaving you free to excel and to break through from whatever level you're at now, right through to the next level. And I don't need to profile people for that.
So you particularly help people in professional services firms to pass their whatever exams they're attempting to study for. And one of the things you do there is to profile them to help them to be themselves, which is an interesting idea.
I love the idea. It's partly because our brains have evolved to make sense of the world and keep us safe. So it's actually your brain, whether you like it or not, is always on the lookout for danger. And it can even be just that sidelong glance. Didn't I just see somebody give me a funny look just a moment ago? It could be even something like that. And you may not even be consciously aware of it, but we're on guard, whether we like it or not, looking out for danger. And it's really a question of being able to understand what those mechanisms are, why they're actually there, designed to keep us safe, and how they can instead sometimes catch us out. They can trip us up. And it's a question of being more aware of how you operate, how you handle information, a bit more aware of the reality around you rather than making stuff up, because your brain actually works by imagining what's there and then checks to see that it's right or not. So we're hallucinating all the time. So if we're aware of our mechanisms, then we're much more likely to be aware of reality and be able to cope with the information better.
Interesting. So in a way, it's a bit like bias, where we have a bias and we almost seek evidence for it. So what you're suggesting is that the brain's invented something and it's looking for the evidence.
Yeah. And then how you're influenced and what actually has you make those decisions. That's a very interesting process. If you're awake to those biases, then you can make an informed choice. Imagine trying to be the best you can be, to have the career of your choice, to have the life of your choice. If you're operating from half information, misinformation, it can't be done really, can it? So that's what the Genius Principles are all about. It's having people have those insights, those understandings of actually how we work, and then learning the skills that have you then operate from a much more aware place.
Give us a couple of examples, if I can ask. What are the Genius Principles?
So there are 6 Genius Principles, and they're all absolutely crucial. What you need to get on, and if you hear any interviews of what we would call highly successful people, when they talk, you realize that they've already incorporated these 6 principles into their lives, and they're operating from that genius level. So we'll take the example that I was talking about. Part of the brain is constantly on the lookout for you. And it's what we might describe as that little voice in your head, warning you. And a lot of people complain about a negative voice. Well, that negative voice really is designed to keep you safe, but you wouldn't know it sometimes. So really, it's that awareness of knowing what that little voice is trying to achieve and actually working with it, rather than either trying to force your way against it or collapsing and just letting it take over.
So really using what your brain and your body is naturally doing.
Exactly, yes. And that comes under Genius Principle number 4, and it's about language. It's about how you talk to yourself. There's a wonderful quote by Dr. John Demartini, and it goes something like, "When you talk to yourself, someone very important is listening."
Oh, I like that. I do.
And we talk to ourselves all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But maybe we need to take more responsibility and make sure that the way we talk to ourselves is going to get us to where we need to get to safely, okay for us, and okay for everyone else.
Yeah, I think we could go off into all sorts of many directions there, but I'm going to hold myself back because we are starting to run out of time. Perhaps I could just conclude by asking for a tip from you for an introvert to help improve their learning or perhaps bring out their genius.
Okay, well, if you're talking specifically about learning something, for a test or an exam, introverts are likely, and I use my words carefully, likely to get on faster, more efficiently on their own in contemplating, organizing, manipulating information on their own. Unlike an extrovert who might consider getting themselves a study buddy or a study group. Let other people know that you need half an hour to yourself. You need an hour to yourself. Any interruptions, unless your pants are on fire, in which case it's an emergency. But except for that, then just give me some peace and quiet so I can just quietly get on with it and do this for myself.
Fabulous. And flipping it the other way around, perhaps if I was a manager and I want to help my team to enhance their skills, what might I do? One tip for me.
I suspect that this is possibly one of those areas where it's less important where along that extroversion, introversion continuum you are. It's probably more about awareness of how you work, what you need, inevitably leading to a better idea of how other people work, what they need, and then having the language skills to bridge the gap so that you find yourself enrolling your team in your vision of what it is that you want us to do, but in such a way that you don't feel unheard, you don't feel judged or misjudged, you don't leave them feeling angry and resentful. The opposite happens, that they actually get where you're coming from, they get why it's a good thing for the common good, and they appreciate what you're saying, and they automatically want to pull together as a team. Now that's a real skill, and it's totally doable.
But from what you said, it starts with the really knowing yourself so you can help others to know themselves. So I'm absolutely convinced that a number of people listening will say, how can we get back in touch? This sounds amazing. What's your website? How can people get in touch?
Well, there are two websites. If you're serious about studying for exams and you want to cut a lot of time out of the frustration and just get on with it, genius-material.com. How to contact me will be there as well. If you're more interested in the self-development, the confidence and the self-development there, then it's geniusprinciples.com.
I'll put both of those on the sleeve notes for the episode. Lisette, it's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate it, John.
I really enjoyed that discussion, and listening again, realised my main thoughts were, number one, your brain is always looking out for you, that little voice in your head. We shouldn't fight it. We should be asking ourselves how we can use it for our own good. Number two, to study, optimally, consider your personality, introvert or extrovert, and many other personality aspects. Number three, to run an effective team, consider your personality, so you can help others to use and understand theirs. What were your thoughts? Add to a discussion on the Facebook page, Activate Your Introvert. What would you like to know about introversion in business? This week's question comes from Simone. What questions do introverts hate being asked and why? Simone has noticed, when attempting to get into discussion with some introverts, that some questions seem to get met negatively, and she wasn't sure why, and didn't want to ask those questions. The most common questions that get asked are you okay? Why are you so quiet? Are you angry or something? Smile, it's not that bad. Why are you so serious all the time? Are people asking these questions because they expect a discussion, think it's showing empathy, or haven't really thought about what they're asking? Introverts feel frustrated at questions like this, as they often get asked, and yet don't believe they are doing anything different. In other words, it's an unjustified question. In asking this sort of question, number one, are you meaning that the other person is behaving differently to their normal, or that you interpret their normal as being differently to your expectations? Number two, what's your intent? Are you attempting to help or open discussion? Let that intent guide a better phrased question, which is less likely to generate a negative response. What question would you like answered on the show? Whether you want to be on the show or just have your question answered, go to activateyourintrovert.co.uk where there's a box for you to ask. You could also follow on Facebook and discuss the answers at the show's page. Activate Your Introvert.
I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourintrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.